So, have you had enough Sovryn Tech today? Well, don't you worry, there is plenty more to come. All throughout this week and much more in the future. Of course, this show is never stopping as we go into the 20s, the 2020s. What some are saying will be the new roaring 20s. Well, before we go into the 20s, I mean, we're already there. But before we do, I have another classic conversation that I want to share with you here. And I share it as an addendum to the Sovryn Tech supplemental episode that was released last week, which I noticed quite a few people sharing and has been through the roof as far as listener numbers. And I'm honored by that. There have been some questions that have come into the show around it. And I think that I'm going to re-release parts of an episode from around the middle of 2019. This episode was originally called Live in Obscurity. It's episode 329 of Sovryn Tech. So I know some of you went back and listened to that playlist, as it were, that I put in the show notes for the Sovryn Tech supplemental episode. That was, what was the title of that one? It was Browsers, Social Media, Messengers, and Control. And it was Sovryn Tech Supplemental 01-2021. So this episode, or that episode, I should say, had a lot of people saying, well, but I need to be on social media for this. I need to do this, blah, 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 or whatever. And so there's something here that I'm going to read, and it's from the Sovryn Tech Telegram group. Now I need to also, and yes, it's a need, I need to also give an update on what's going on with Telegram, because as of this recording to this new intro for this classic conversation, Pavel Durov has come out with some interesting stances, and he's particularly tweeted, well, we'll talk about it. But anyway, I want to read this from the Sovryn Tech Telegram group, which has been, popular, very heavily used, and just brilliant conversations happening in there, peaceful ones, of course. And this is from my brother, my co-host on TIE Fighter Renegades, Robin Freebeard. And I don't think that he'll mind me sharing this here because, anyone can link into the Sovryn Tech Telegram group and see what he had to say. And here it is. Number one, if you're just concerned about your own freedom and privacy, sorry to tell you, but you're on your own. These companies, and he's meaning the tech giants, these companies and organizations have declared their allegiance, and it's not to the individual. Stop expecting someone else to come to save you. No one is coming. Waiting for the next app, network, or site is a fool's errand. I couldn't have said that better myself. And I know I've said similar, but I couldn't have said it better myself. And then he also shared an episode, the episode that I'm going to clip in here. And he said, number 2, listen to this again. And it was the episode Live in Obscurity from 2019. Of course, Rob's a brilliant guy. And I take his point, and I think his point really, really, really needs to get out there. If you are concerned about your own freedom and privacy, then don't bother waiting for the next app. Don't bother looking around. You don't have to. The ultimate point that we got to in that Sovryn Tech supplemental that I did about the whole situation, about what happened on January 6th and so on, and the reaction from the tech giants, government, etc. The ultimate conclusion that I came to is that you are all going to have to set up your own servers. Okay, like everybody should be setting up their own Nextcloud. If you want to be able to communicate with the people you care about, even create little groups and everything, you are going to have to provide the bandwidth. And so setting up Nextcloud, popping it onto a Raspberry Pi. In fact, I'll put a link in the show notes because there's an image you can download that'll put Nextcloud 19, and it automatically, you just plug in the Raspberry Pi basically to, to an Ethernet cable, boom, 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 and it just loads right up. Okay. In a Raspberry Pi, you can get, I'd recommend going higher end with the Raspberry Pi, get the Raspberry Pi 4 with 8 gig of RAM. You might want to put a nice put a really nice fan on that, okay, because you're going to be using it, basically as a server. But that's, a sub $100 way to take control of your own messaging platform. And that's really what you can do. Because Telegram, I am now debating how long it is for this world. In fact, I just had someone tweet at me, Pavel Durov's tweet, which went live not but a half hour ago as of this recording. And he basically says right here in the tweet, public calls to violence have no place on Telegram. And there are multiple groups, interestingly, that aren't considered illegal or problem in other countries, other than perhaps America or the United States, I should say, are getting banned by Telegram. Now, I want to be clear about this. There's a good bet that most of the banning that's happening within Telegram is more so coming from, shall I say, activists. I mean, even if you don't agree with their side, they're activists for their side of things. Activists who are reporting these channels to Telegram, and then Telegram, looks into it and takes action. I don't know that Telegram is engaging in any kind of mass scanning of, or algorithmic look at everything that's going on in every channel. That's a whole other debate. Anyway, there are also other there's organizations suing Apple right now. I know there's been stories in the Washington Post about this. Basically, and for Pavel Durov to go to Twitter about this whole matter, Telegram is experiencing a bit of a shitstorm. And so it is a debate of, again, how long that will be for this world, or how long it will be any kind of bastion. Now, another thing is MeWe has come out and very clearly stated that we are not Parler or Gab. We will not allow haters, lawbreakers, violence inciters, etc. They're not welcome there. All of these companies, are coming out now and saying, oh, no, we're not going to allow for this. Now, if you equate even, whatever the reality is around any of that, if you equate that kind of speech with free speech, or if you think that this is ultimately about shutting down free speech or the truth or something like that, it really doesn't seem like there's anywhere to go. And Rob's point is 100% on. There is no app coming to save you. There is no one else coming to save you. Now, this classic conversation that I'm going to play for you and that Rob recommended everybody listen to, the clip, it's going to go about an hour that I'm going to include. Again, this is long before the pandemic, long before the events of January 6th. Long before. And I basically say in it, we need independent app repositories, right? Because that's the concern right now with Telegram is that, well, Apple's going to, cave and Apple will rip it away from the App Store. We could get into, well, on Android, you could put in, you can install F-Droid, and Telegram's an F-Droid, even if the Google Play Store wants to remove Telegram alongside with Apple, because they have been working in concert, it would appear these days. There's nowhere really, that's the only way that we could go. It's not uninteresting. And this is, I'll update here quickly. I have recommended with an Android phone to use the Advanced Protection Program, which Google offers for free. And this is basically a way of locking down your Google account to where you need to have second factor hardware authentication, like a YubiKey or so on. I've recommended this for some time. Now there's concerns because Google's Titan key had run into an exploit that could have broken that security. We're not going to get into that here. But something that is kind of new for the Advanced Protection Program is that it no longer allows you to install third-party app repositories like F-Droid. And I see that as a major problem because, again, when this kind of stuff is like what's happening right now, that's when we need to install independent APKs, say, of Signal, or, install independent APKs or alternative app stores that allow for open source software, and whatever else, something like Telegram. But Google is tightening the noose. And I don't think, considering that we know with Android 12, which is upcoming, that they are going to make dramatic changes in how Android handles third-party app repositories, which probably has to do more with enterprise than anything to do with the individual. Bottom line being is that, yeah, all the noose is just getting tightened up on all of this, all of these platforms where, one could argue that activists, regardless of side, could gather. So what do you do? Well, like we said previously, it's time for us to set up our own servers, either it be Nextcloud or Sovryn Tech sponsor Free Talk Live did a brilliant thing. In fact, I already set up a group on it. They took one of my recommendations. I'm not saying I gave them the idea. They're smart people over there. I'm just saying that they also did what I had recommended, which is, they took a matrix instance. They set up their own on their own servers that are, far away. And they are operating a social media service, that you can access via Element, which we talked about in the previous episode, in the supplemental episode. So that's the right move, right? Setting up their own servers, making their own action happen, not relying upon Amazon or anything like that, and building their own social media network. And I say bravo. I'll put a link in the show notes for that as well, because I think that's important. And if Telegram gets yanked away, well, that's my backup, is to be, available. Telegram is still, front and center for Sovryn Tech. But if that goes away, I'm not going to MeWe, unlike other libertarians. I'm not going to, any of that horseshit. I'm going to go there. I already have it set up to where there's already a Sovryn Tech Polytechnic group on the what you would call the LRN Matrix server. I'll put a link in the show notes, so if you want to figure out how to do it, you can do it. But that's the right moves. That's what we need to do, is set up our own shit. Okay. We don't need to wait for some company to swoop in and save the day. All right. We can save it ourselves. Now, if you are concerned, say, about, well, how do I get my message out to, people who maybe haven't heard me, or blah, 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 how can I become a celebrity in the 21st century without social media? Well, that's where the other part of this Live in Obscurity episode, I feel like, comes in, is that it is a reality check on what the hell are you doing on social media in the first place? What is the purpose behind that in and of itself? And how is that meeting your own needs and desires? Is it? And it gets into the conversation from, it starts with an ancient perspective and then kind of builds up into a modern perspective and what all of that means. And I'll bring it up many times. There is a French saying that's basically something to the effect of, to be happy, live hidden. And I think that's the other part of this that we, well, like I said, reality check, that we need to do a reality check on, is that why are we interested in having all of these apps and giving away all of this data and being out there spewing, all of our crap as much anyway? It's valid to want your opinions to be heard. Sure. It's the same reason I do Sovryn Tech. There's nothing wrong with that. But what are you expecting? What are your goals with all of this? As to where, if it's more, I have a right to privacy, rights are nonsense, but we'll just speak conventionally. I have a right to privacy. I don't want the government to see what I'm saying to X, Y, Z, whatever. Okay. Well, we already have some solutions for that and we can set it up. And it's to the point now, and this stuff's been around for so long that it's not that hard. Might take a little learning, but it's not that hard to set up. We have to take these things in our own hands. Silicon Valley, it's abundantly clear whose side they're on, like Rob said, and it's not the side of the individual. It's the side of the state. Don't look there for answers. So this classic conversation, I think you'll find it interesting. Interesting that because it opens up with talking about how the Google Play Store was really reining in certain apps. And again, I make the call for and look, that's nothing new either. I mean, if you listen to the Dark Android episodes from 5-6 years ago, I was saying, no, we have to have independent app installs, independent app repositories. We cannot rely. Look, I'll say it here again. The Google Play Store is a rootkit. It's fucking malware. We don't want to rely on that at all. It's awesome that so many people are really, I mean, they are having like that eureka moment right now where what they've always kind of known, I don't like what these companies are doing and this plug could get pulled at any time. It happened. And now people are wanting to take action. Okay. Yes. But you need to take action. Don't wait around. And I've been in this game too. Okay. There are technologies that I talked about 7-8 years ago, okay, that never came to fruition, that never came to be. And I'm never going to get burned again like that. Your shit either exists or it might as well never, because the solutions are needed right now. And fortunately, solutions are here, good ones at that. If it gets so bad, if something happens, with the LRN matrix or whatever, I'll have my Nextcloud where people can, we can connect that way, right? Because I can just set it up to where it's more of an open group. This is where we're at. People are realizing, wow, it's fucking everywhere. I mean, it was funny. I was listening to This Week in Tech. And Leo Laporte was saying how people were calling into his show, the tech guy, and they're like, hey, I don't want, and it was amazing. Like the phone calls were awesome. You have these a lot of them older people. Yeah, I don't want to deal with Apple and I don't want to deal with Google anymore. So I don't want an iOS device and I don't want an Android phone, or I want a tablet that's not Google or Apple run. And look, I'm going to take the win on just the fact that people want that finally. I've been saying that that was part of the whole point of the Dark Android project. I've been saying that for years and years and years. I'm so glad that people are finally getting it. Okay. But you got to know where to look to get the answers, but the answers are out there. There are alternatives to all of this. It's also hopeful that, and I know it's because of the pandemic, it's also hopeful though, that like laptop sales numbers are through the roof. Good. Have people get computers again, real computers that they can more or less control. Because I don't think it's very difficult to really ultimately control the smartphone. Everybody's freaking out and there have been, specious claims, but then also now with the Washington Post story and so on, how, Apple's just going to rip the Telegram app right off of your phone and you're done. Like, you won't even get the chance to use it again. Even if you already had it installed, they're just going to auto delete it. Well, possibility of that happening or not, or capability of that happening or not, just get a real fucking machine. Okay. Where you have actual control of the software on there and there's no app repositories or rootkits that it can even dream of trying. As in, of course, use Linux, which we mentioned last time as well, among other things. Yep. It's a learning curve, but do you get it? It's finally time. It's here. You realize that you don't want to be in the tech giant's grasp. Okay, but you're going to have to learn some things to get out of that grasp. And if you want to keep up the level of communication that you're used to, but the answers are out there. That's the beautiful thing, is that we don't have to wait. It's out there. You can do it. So I'm sharing this classic conversation. I don't want to spend too much longer in this intro. I'm sharing this classic conversation because it gets in the concept of living in obscurity, which is an ancient concept, gets into the philosophy of how to engage the world. Okay. And ask the questions in today's world of why do I want to be on social media? What exactly, how do I want to communicate? What level of exposure do I want of my life and so on? And I think it's an incredibly important conversation to bring up. And it's great to have the vindication of course, that we've been saying on Sovryn Tech for many years that, hey, this day is coming, because you'll absolutely hear that in the clip that I've included. I have no interest in being any kind of, major celebrity. I enjoy doing what I do. I enjoy entertaining and informing people and all this. I mean, that's great. But I sure as fuck, and you'll hear me explain more in the clip, or in the episode, that I don't want everybody to know my name. I don't want to be regarded as a thought leader. I don't want people, looking to me for whatever. And if you want all of those things, I think maybe this episode will help you ask the question, why? What if that's not really, because, this is the other part of it. Our metrics of success are based on very skewed perspectives, in my opinion, and are based on the success of people who ultimately I don't think are good people. I don't think Jeff Bezos is an ethical person. I don't think Bill Gates is an ethical person. I don't think Elon Musk is an ethical person. I don't think Jack Dorsey is an ethical person. I don't think Mark Zuckerberg is an ethical person. We can keep going down the list. I think these guys play ball and do shady deals with everything that's wrong in this world. It's hilarious that somehow those asshats get to decide what you or I can say online, or, what businesses are allowed to operate and which ones are not, which is absolutely the ramifications of shutting out somebody from AWS. What qualifications do they have for that? Even if you believed in qualifications, what qualifications do they have for that? Did they go to Berkeley for clinical psychology at all? What? Who are these people? You didn't even elect them, for fuck's sake. And yet they basically are playing politics right now. No, you have to solve this. We have to solve this for ourselves. Okay. You have to solve it for yourself. You have to take this into your own hands. No, you don't. Before somebody gets ridiculous, you don't have to go in your own backyard, dig up your own sand and bake your own chips, with silicone. you just, no, no one's saying that at all. Okay. That is an argument. Those kind of arguments are outrageous and a tactic, in my opinion. Just like saying, well, a world without Google, how would you know where to go with maps and all this other stuff? Or how would you find anything on the internet? And again, I just instantly want to say to people, it's like, you realize there was an internet without Google, right? And that it was very informative and very enjoyable. I was there. Like, people. So anyway, I would love for you to check out this classic conversation. I think it's a great refresher. It's a great, again, a reality check on perspective, on what do you want, which is the most important question that any one of us can really ask. And this classic conversation will make you ask it. I am going to go to a sponsor quick, but then as soon as we come back, it goes right into, you'll hear the little dream sequence music, and it goes right into that classic conversation, Live in Obscurity from 2019. And I will let the show ride out with it. I will see all of you on the other side. Don't worry. Sovryn Tech can never be shut down. Ever. Hey, is Sovryn Tech not enough for you? Well, let me tell you about something you'll never get enough of. No, I mean it. We're talking about a radio show and podcast that goes all night long, 7 nights a week, 3 hours a night, 365 days a year, and has been going since the early aughts, baby. I am talking about none other than Free Talk Live. It's the show you control. That's right. It's an open phones call-in show that is ready for you. And if you're worried that your voice isn't going to get heard, don't be. We are talking about the only libertarian radio show stateside. And not only that, it's also the number 26 talk show in the United States. Start listening now and go ahead and hit that massive back catalog at freetalklive.com. The Golden Stallion guarantees a good time, and you might even find some episodes with me on them when you do. That's freetalklive.com, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Let's get back to the show. Because, one of the reasons that parents are so willing to buy Apple devices for kids is because Apple is known to be, well, shall we say, conservative in what they allow in the App Store on iOS devices. As in, there's a lot of different apps, say apps that show perhaps some nudity or even sexually suggestive material, or like say an app that even just in the icon has a gun. Those get regularly banned. Of course, notoriously for years, farting apps were banned from the App Store by Apple. So Conservative, I think, is the word. But anyway, you know, a lot of people went over to Google, went over to Android, because a lot of that, you know, the opportunity to make apps that were, I wouldn't even say risque, but are just, you know, don't have such stringent rules against them, were accepted. That is no longer the case. Just in the past couple weeks, Google has really, really hammered down on what's allowed in the Play Store, and without question and openly. This is all about making the Play Store a safe place for kids. So they're just taking a page out of Apple's playbook for this. But I mean, there's already been the case now. Apparently, this more had to do with the ability to purchase within the app, as compared to, you know, as compared to it actually being about marijuana. But there were marijuana apps that were banned from the Play Store. But apparently, if they just update their shopping capabilities to where, this is something else Apple did. Apple won't let you buy the Amazon app. Remember when the Amazon app got banned from the App Store by Apple? It was because the Amazon app was or maybe it was the Kindle app, whatever, was allowing you to buy books through the Kindle app itself. It was creating a separate store, and thus effectively a place where Apple wasn't getting a cut of the change. Okay, a cut of the profits. And they don't like that. Well, Google's doing the exact same thing now, quite frankly. And that's really what it's about. But they were banning marijuana apps again. Apparently, Google came out and said it wasn't about the marijuana. They just have to update the ability to do in-app purchases and all this stuff. They're taking a stand against loot. Now they're basically saying that if you have any kind of lottery within your game, where it's loot boxes and all this, which is, thinly veiled gambling, that you have to openly put what the odds are of you winning a prize, I guess. I don't fuck with loot boxes. I don't mess with games that have IAP, really, unless it's an IAP where I spend $5 and I get the full game. I just refuse to play anything or use any app. I mean, some apps maybe I'd be willing to go with a subscription, but very few. I just refuse to pay for something where it's not one and done. I have no interest in that. I think it's a complete waste of money otherwise. That's just me, but that's how I feel about it. So anyway, they've really cracked down on loot boxes. They're cracking down more on hate speech. Again, all of this stuff is the same thing that Apple does. And also there is a crackdown on sexual content, including just sexually suggestive content. So, I mean, the interesting thing here to take away, in my opinion, is that really any argument that somehow, and I know I've made them in the past too, years ago, any argument that Google was somehow the more palatable platform, or that Android was the more palatable platform because the Play Store, allowed for a greater breadth of content. Perhaps if you're somebody who's into some kind of adult content, you were allowed to access it through the Play Store, or not just adult, but illicit, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I don't want to say illicit either. I mean, fuck legality, but you get my point. Okay. That's not true anymore. They're becoming just as bad as Apple. And the thing is that all of this stuff can be very arbitrary. All of these rules that they lay down can be extremely arbitrary. And it just goes to show, folks, we have to get away from these app repositories being controlled by the tech giants. Now, Android's still a valid platform. Why? Because you can install F-Droid or other app stores. I mean, and we're not even getting into, I would love to talk about it this week, but I want to see what happens with more of the fallout. But Huawei, the shitstorm that they're going through, where they're getting banned from the SD Alliance and a lot of other things. They are not going to be allowed to load Android on. They have to come out, was it ArcOS, I think that they're going to end up calling it. They have to create their own app store and all this stuff. I mean, fortunately, Android is open source to a degree where you can easily adapt to that and just build off of it quickly, and hopefully people's user experience doesn't change much, kind of like how you can use Lineage OS and still install Android apps on it, because it's just basically a fork of Android. So Android's still valid in that sense, but this clamping down by Google and all that should really be bringing it to fore that, wow, we need independent app repositories. And, there's dangers around those, because sometimes you don't know what you're installing when you don't have, Google's Play Store Protect, making sure that there isn't any kind of malware or other malicious stuff involved with the app. But really, I think it's a case where we got to take the risk of,
getting away from the very arbitrary controls that Apple and Google are both engaging in with what kind of apps are allowed. Because look, if you're guy, gal, Z, whatever, in your whatever age you happen to be, you're an adult. Who's to tell you what kind of content you can consume and can't consume? I think that's absolutely nuts that there's those kinds of restrictions. And to make things even crazier, it feels arbitrary even on which apps Google goes after, which is very strange. How's the InfoWars app still, and especially when they talk about like hate speech, like their hate speech rules, maybe now it's going to change because their hate speech rules are more specific than some I've seen, but they're still very broad. I'm amazed that the InfoWars app is still in there. And there's others too. Because then also these platforms, they're also banning, videos from YouTube, say particularly like from someone like InfoWars and some others. How do you ban like the content, say the videos or podcasts or whatever, that a lot of these, what I think, people on the left would call it, would classify as hate speech and that others would classify as hate speech and all this. How do you ban that from like your platforms, your distribution platforms? But then from like your app stores, you're not doing anything about apps that can still distribute that very same content. Maybe this is a step in that direction, but then you might want to pay attention and have some concern around the fact that this can be arbitrary and these rules can change at any given time. And your app that could be very popular, making you a lot of money for whatever reason, because I don't know what happens in it, but it just suddenly breaks the rules that Google has and you're kicked off. Do you have other options with Android? Again, like I said, sure, you do, but you got to make people aware of these options. And I think it's the writing's on the wall that we got to start getting more and more people off of these major app repositories and looking at the alternatives. That doesn't mean, we're not going to get away from the Google Play Store right now or anything, but I think it's time to start developing a lot of these alternatives in other parts of the world. People don't realize that in other parts of the world, they're very commonplace. China, lots of countries. And granted, those, not to say that some of those app stores don't have structures of control around them either, but in other parts of the world, alternative app stores, again, very, very commonplace. People aren't beholden to the app store or to, if you have an iPhone, you have very few options as far as that goes. But if any, jailbreak broken devices, that's another conversation. But like the Google Play Store? No, around the world, lots of people have other options. And I think in other parts of the world, we need to start paying attention to that. Just bringing that up. So, okay, let's get into our main story for this week. And the main story, like I said, this is kind of part of what's really going to be almost a trilogy of, maybe it's a way of doing cypherpunking right. And, we'll see how that shapes up. I might not get to this next week, kind of closing out this trilogy. But this is important. In fact, I'm going to bring up something to you. If I have a regret with doing this show, with doing Sovryn Tech for so many years now. Now, obviously, I don't regret my audience. The thousands and thousands of you, I'm so honored that so many of you listen, and so many of you have been listening for all of these years. That blows my fucking mind. Thank you. But there's a part of me that kind of wishes I was more anonymous, or particularly, I'm not saying like that the way sure, I use, I use Tails. I can do lots of things where I can, be anonymous as far as I want to go with that. But a part of me wishes I started this show without you knowing just who in the hell I am, or without having it be about Brian Sovryn. And I can't help but think of, and this story I'm about to share with you is relevant to social media and the obsession with social media today as well. I'm a little jealous of the Twitter accounts like Swift on Security, or, there's a few of these where you have no idea who the hell's running this thing. You have no idea who they are, but they're just putting out dynamite shit. Obviously, it's somebody brilliant. Maybe it's multiple people, actually. But it's really, really great stuff. You don't know who's doing it, but it's just, one of these anonymous Twitter accounts that you can follow. And they're often laying out some really great truth, and they get to do so, of course, without repercussions, or at least without some repercussions. But at the same time, the classical cypherpunk in me, shall we say, has a real problem with being known. You know, like that I'm like a known commodity. I mean, I'm honored. I get asked to speak at events, you know, all the time. I'm really honored by that. Okay. But at the same time, like I appreciate that, but then also like, I don't really want to be known. I shouldn't be known. If I am doing all the things that I've been laying out on Sovryn Tech, you know, all the different technologies to use, all the way technologies should be implemented and so on, ultimately, you kind of shouldn't know who I am. You know, I don't need the fame. I actually don't even want the fame. I want my opinion out there. I mean, I've said this many times. The reason I do Sovryn Tech is so that, you know, like I don't hear what my ideology, I don't hear my beliefs, I don't hear my opinions, I don't hear my thoughts or the knowledge that, or the factoids or whatever that I know, I don't hear them getting put out into the world. So I took it upon myself to put myself and my ideologies, opinions, factoids, etc. out there. And that's really the ultimate reason why this show exists. It is not because I need some kind of celebritydom. Again, I think if you're doing life right, you ignore that. Now, I mean, I am a big fan of, I mean, I'm not saying this person's 100% accurate. Then again, who is? I'm a big fan of Epicurus. In fact, this will come up in this article. And I have quoted Epicurus many times, you know, throughout Sovryn Tech's history. But Epicurus has a classic saying, and there's no way I'm not going to botch up the Latin on this, so I will just say it for you in English. And that is, live in obscurity. Very, very classic. And Epicurus, understand, is one of the classical hedonists. And interestingly, now, I mean, I self-identify as a hedonist completely, of course, an ethical hedonist, but a hedonist nonetheless. And look, I've done so many episodes about hedonism. If you think that it means me just getting trashed or something like that, whatever, you have no idea what hedonism is about. You could even start on Wikipedia, and it's amazing how that will not be the definition that shows up, because fortunately there are people who have a much better sense of language than, well, I guess the mass of the populace. But regardless, or the mass of the populace, that's talk about not having a grasp of language, that's kind of saying the same thing. Regardless, ironically, as a hedonist and someone who has kind of spoken out about Stoicism here and there throughout the run of Sovryn Tech, I am actually going to read parts of, not the entirety, you can read the entirety, link is in the show notes. I am going to read parts of a blog post, effectively, on Medium, from one of the guys he's really repopularized Stoicism for people today. Grant you, as I say whenever I've critiqued Stoicism, the Stoicism that people are espousing to you today is not the Stoicism that was practiced, you know, thousands of years ago. They are very, very different things. And you can see, in fact, most people, what they think is Stoicism is actually, a lot of it's actually hedonism now. But regardless of that, we're not going to get into that conversation right now. But here's the story. The story is, or the blog post, and again, I'm not going to read the entirety, but there's important things to take away from here. Important things that speak to your interactions with technology today. Social media, any app you can think of, you go down the list. Okay. And I want to give Ryan Holiday credit here, because in this blog post, he does quote Epicurus. He does quote a hedonist saying that he got it right. So I'll give him the credit for that. Maybe that's why I'm so willing to actually entertain this and read this. But here's the title of the blog. Here's why you've never heard of the most successful people in the world. Now, a lot of my listeners, and this is just from April 5th. This is just from this year, from 2019. A lot of my listeners might think, well, the reason you don't hear about the most successful people in the world is because it's a new world order and they're hiding in the shadows, the Rothschilds, blah, 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 whatever, all that horse shit. Okay. Anyway, let's read some of what Ryan Holiday has to say, because again, I think there is a real takeaway from this and something to consider. So here we go. The vast majority of successful people who have ever lived are people you've never heard of. If we are to drill down further and consider happy successful people, that being successful people that are happy, it's almost certain that we haven't heard of them. The reason for that is something called the survivorship bias. Only a very small number of stories and identities make their way into the history books or into legend. And by definition, those that sought fame and fortune beyond what any human could possibly enjoy are often overrepresented among them. Even my own writing is guilty of this. I tell stories about Rockefeller and Grant and Alexander the Great. I don't talk about the people who were talented but had a better sense of what was enough. A better sense, Stanley breaking it, I'm going to repeat that. A better sense of what was enough. Or the ones who were happy to let others get all the credit while they played for the love of the game and the craft. This is true of the Stoics, too, who I have helped to popularize. Of course, talking about Ryan Holiday. Reading on. It's only possible to write about the extremely successful ones, the emperors and the writers, the playwrights and the generals, because those are the ones whose names were etched into the record. But given the popularity of Stoicism in Rome and throughout history, the vast majority of Stoics would have been ordinary people living ordinary lives of discipline and virtue. Fathers, mothers, businessmen, diplomats, and blacksmiths. There would have been literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Stoics over the last 2,500 years, and many of them were arguably better and more admirable than Marcus Aurelius, or Seneca, or Cato. In fact, Stanley breaking it, I'm going to cut in on this. So I know a lot of people want to talk about, well, if hedonism, because I've made the claim that hedonism, which in many ways is the antecedent to Stoicism, if hedonism is, and I've made this claim, that it is the original human philosophy, like, in fact, I dare say it's what we're born into in a state of nature. If it's the original, how come there aren't much writings about it? Now, I've laid out somewhat of degree what could be called a conspiracy theory that, a lot of it's been burned to the ground, a lot of those writings and everything. But what if it's just as simple as is that the hedonists were doing exactly, what Ryan Holiday's going to be talking about here, or living like these Stoics who were Stoics far better than Marcus Aurelius ever was. He's the one you look to read about Stoicism, far better than Seneca. But they did it right because they lived, like Epicurus said, they lived in obscurity. Perhaps the hedonists did it right, and they lived their lives, their proper lives, as laid out within perhaps the ideology of hedonism, in obscurity. And so you never know about them. You don't have the writings. You don't have any of that. Why? Because they just did their thing. They understood what was enough. And that's going to be a key point of what I'm going to talk about here. But I want to keep reading on. So here we go. It might also be said that the ones we've never heard of, those were the lucky ones. It wasn't fun to be the head of state. It wasn't fun to be executed by a head of state either. It wasn't as fun as you think to be Rockefeller or Kennedy or Lance Armstrong. In a famous profile in The Atlantic on Saddam Hussein, Mark Bowden wrote that, quote, "One might think that the most powerful man has the most choices, but in reality, he has the fewest. Too much depends on his every move," end quote. This is true not just for dictators, but for anyone in a position of power, influence, or responsibility. For instance, the now standard prescription for an American president after he leaves office, the former most powerful person in the world, is to sign a book deal, obligating them to slock in on television shows and an endless series of hostile interviews. Then they have to raise the money for their own monument to their own honor, the presidential library, and it's all downhill from there. See Bill Clinton, who's the most, quote unquote, the most powerful man in the world, a couple terms removed, as just another lame guest on Pittsburgh's 96.1's Morning Freak Show with Mikey and Big Bob. Listen to his, he gives a few more examples about, where being in power actually doesn't really give you power. In fact, that's kind of the gist of what we're going to get here, okay, is that power actually comes from from that living in obscurity, from perhaps not having the responsibility, from not being in charge, from not being well known. That's where the ability to truly choose what you want to do with your life comes from. But let's read on. Along with extreme success comes extreme costs. It is often an all-consuming drive that draws one to the spotlight, and inevitably to dark places as well. Alexander the Great died at age 32 after he'd driven himself and his men to the ends of the earth. Joseph Kennedy, who created a multi-generational legacy of powerful, brilliant children, also lobotomized his own daughter because she couldn't quite measure up. And what of the countless successful people who lost their privacy, spouses, or youth in the pursuit of dominance in some sport or in business or politics? What of those who kept reaching after they had success and destroyed everything they had built with the final overstretch? What does this have to do with you? Isn't there someone whose status and success you envy? Someone who has gotten more recognition, who has sold more books or widgets or real estate, who has won more medals or set more records? And when we think of these people, we think, quote, "Oh, they're the lucky ones. They got what I should have gotten," end quote. But is that really true? Maybe the lucky ones are the hidden figures, the people who don't suffer the burdens of a public office or a clique of hangers, or the anxiety of a reputation to uphold, or the chorus of critics. They're the ones who are deprived? Please. Most people with a public persona tell you that the downsides outweigh the upsides. Stanley, breaking in for a second. I can think of quite a few people who have said that. Jim Carrey. There's a long, long list of people who talk about that sort of thing. Reading on, they have a target on their back from critics. They have less creative freedom. They feel irresponsible when they turn down opportunities because they know other people would kill for the chance. It's not all bad, of course, but there are real problems that go along with fame and fortune. Meanwhile, several studies have shown that there are diminishing returns to happiness the higher you get in the income tax bracket. Once your basic needs, and then some, are taken care of, money may actually make things harder. You know the song lyric, "Mo money, mo problems," but the same is true for other forms of success. A mayor doesn't usually see their hair turn gray as fast as a president. A working character actor doesn't have to deal with being typecast. The creator who never quite becomes the next big thing might actually have a longer, more endearing career than the debut artist who is feted about town. It's why a few years ago, the notoriously private but still wonderfully popular musician and songwriter Sia would write, quote, "If anyone besides famous people knew what it was like to be a famous person, they would never want to be famous," end quote. There's an old joke along those lines. The best way to punish someone is to give them exactly what they wish for. In fact, I'll give you a real world example of this, not just Sia, but I'll give you another music example. How about that? Guy named Hugh McDonald. Ever heard of this guy? Do you know who Hugh McDonald is? Now, maybe if you're somebody who listens to one of my other shows, maybe if you listen to the Hard and Fast podcast, you might know who Hugh McDonald is. Hugh McDonald is a musician, an American musician, tremendous one at that. He's a bass player. And do you know what band he's in? Bon Jovi. But wait a minute, you're like, well, I've heard of Tico Torres, I've heard of Richie Sambora, I've heard of David Bryan, I've heard of John Bon Jovi. I've even heard of Alex Van Such, whatever. And like, who the hell's Hugh McDonald? Precisely. Maybe you've even heard of Phil X. I don't know. Hugh McDonald he became their session bassist and also their touring bassist quite a few years ago for Bon Jovi. Nobody knows who he is. He loves that fact. He loves the fact that he can be on stage playing to thousands of people whenever the fuck Bon Jovi decides to play, that he gets to be on these albums and the hits, and whatever, but nobody has, in fact, he won't even show up in a lot of the photos. Very few photos will he show up in. He doesn't even want to be known. He gets to have the best of both worlds. He has the anonymity of nobody knowing who the hell he was, perhaps because he wasn't in the band, with the early albums like Slippery When Wet and so on. But then also he gets to live that rock star, kind of dream of playing in front of thousands of people. Now, the reason that he enjoys not being known, because he could be known, he could go and boast around who he is. I fucking play in Bon Jovi. And is that a boast? Hell, you're backing it up, baby. You got to be one of the best to do that. John Bon Jovi's no slouch. There's a reason that guy's always on top. He loves it because he can go into his local grocery store. He can stop at a gas station and get out of his car and pump gas, or he can go wherever the hell he wants. No one's going to have a fucking clue where he is, or who he is, and he can just live his life, but then he can do the rock star dream at the same time. Can John Bon Jovi do that? No, fuck, everybody recognizes John Bon Jovi. Everybody recognizes Richie Sambora. Tico Torres, the drummer, that guy's got a tremendous look that you can't help but notice. People are going to recognize them. And so they don't have a moment of privacy. They have a real lack of options because they have to be very careful where they even stop, unless, they're going to get mauled, maybe in a kinder way, but you get my point. So I think Hugh McDonald does it right. I kind of wish I had it set up like Hugh McDonald, where, okay, yeah, I have a podcast that's fairly large as far as podcasts go. And, but then there's a part of me that just wishes nobody knew who the hell I was. You know what I mean? Like, I go to a gym, people, I have guys saying hi to me and everything. And it's nice. I'm not necessarily complaining. And fortunately, I'm not like The Rock or something like that. But boy, it'd be nice if you're just like completely, well, if you lived in obscurity. Now, let me read on more with this story. This is a very important subject to talk about. Okay. Because there's two big points here, concepts of power and enough. And I want to talk about both of them. Let's read on. Quote, "The key then, when you find yourself wanting more, feeling inferior because you don't have more, is to think about that. Don't give the fantasies more weight than they deserve. See them for what they are. When you find yourself pining for fame and recognition, stop and consider what it might actually feel like when you get it. Why you think you'll be the exception to the rule and will find happiness in what nearly everyone else in history has found to be a chimera. The motto of the philosopher Epicurus, which was taken up by the great essayist Montaigne as well, live in obscurity. The French saying, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this very well either, is pour vivre heureux vivons caché. I know I did that wrong. But anyway, it's, quote, in order to live happily, live hidden. Stallion breaking it. Boy, there's a truth. Take that one to the bank. Well, not to the bank. Actually, don't go to the bank. Take that one to, your hardware wallet. Take that one to your Trezor. All right. Reading on. This is not to say you must be poor or a failure. You can still be extraordinary. You just don't have to be the most extraordinary. You don't have to strive to beat out all the other broken people, to be the most well-known out of everyone who ever wanted to be known. Because what is that actually worth in the long run? Do you think you'll appreciate your fame and money after you die? You think Alexander the Great knows that Alexandria is still standing? So that's the recalibration. There is a big difference between having enough that all your needs are met and being a billionaire. He's saying there's a difference between having enough where all of your needs are met. You're still having all your needs met, maybe even having a nice car. And then there's being a billionaire. Those are two very different things. Between being Taylor Swift, the global superstar, and Sia. And those differences are not all good. In fact, many of them are objectively not good. The next time you feel screwed, that you haven't gotten your big break, or watch as some potential life-changing opportunity to level up escapes your grasp, ask yourself if that's really the case. Is it really bad luck, or has fortune done you a kindness? On the contrary, the life just below the top, the middle-class life, the just enough success but not too much, that's the real blessing. Now, I read this, and fuck, did I thought this was so spot on. Okay? I mean, it really, really was. I hear so many people, okay? And believe me, I hear this. Even from people, I'm not going to name names, but even from people that you'd probably think were above this kind of shit. Okay? I hear people, man, how do I get 5 digits in Twitter followers? How do I get 1 million Instagram followers? Believe me, these are people who you think would not care about that sort of thing. Who you think they'd have it together, right? And who the hell of us even really has it together, right? Let me tell you, as somebody that has worked in advertising, marketing, and PR, and look, I've had my moments where I've had, 5 digits in, like, say, Twitter followers or something like that. I mean, I've been there. Let me tell you, to get all of those followers, those millions of followers, I mean, you look at, follow the people that are, quote unquote, what they call Insta famous, right? On Instagram. They have to post, like, I don't know, 3, 4, however many pictures a day. Perhaps their body has to be in some kind of certain shape, to even be able to, get people to look at it. I mean, and to say nothing of the fact that the algorithms and, whatever Instagram or Twitter or whoever wants to implement as far as how posts are seen in the first place, I mean, they don't even have control over that. But there is, I mean, you really, you have to be nonstop. You have to be responding to all those people. And you do, because it's gotten to the point now where people are like, well, if they don't respond to me, I don't really engage. I mean, I can never in my life would I want to be a big deal on social media. I'm on Twitter, sure. Okay. I mean, and people know how much I think social media is toxic. Just the very concept is toxic and a failure. Okay. But to get to these levels that these people appreciate, if you're not a celebrity for doing something else, if you're just like social media famous, I mean, you have no life. You're going 24/7. You're always available. It's fucking insane. Or you have these people who talk about, I don't know, whatever that asshat with his 4-hour work week and whatever that dumbass's name is. Okay. You have these guys that write these books. You get other people to do it and blah, blah, blah. And, you think that you don't have to put in all that work. No, you have to be constantly available. Even if you have a bunch of probably what in his mind, was it Tim something? In his mind, what he probably thinks are a bunch of peons. Okay. To have all those ducks in a row, you have to be constantly on. In your brain, you're pretty much encountering the world with only half of your attention at best at any given moment. Because you're constantly thinking, again, even if you have other people do it, you're constantly on and blah, 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 just to, I don't know. Why? Because you want to become like crazily rich. You want to have billions of dollars and all this stuff. When here's the question I want to posit to you. Look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you wanting, a lot of money and stuff like this, but isn't there such a thing as enough? Even ANCAPs listen to me. Come on. Like, how much do you really need? In fact, I know some of the best ANCAPs that I know. They get to, a certain amount of money with a certain amount of zeros behind it. And they're like, okay, they will do their best. They're going to just invest smart. And then they more or less coast on that the rest of their lives. And I know guys and gals that have done that. That's exactly what they do. A lot of Bitcoin people, I know that they do the same damn thing, and right on to them. Okay, they made it. They've got that nest egg or whatever. They make it work for them. They do some Harry Brown shit, and which read Harry Brown. They do that, and permanent portfolio, whatever, and then they roll with it. Okay, and they never have to work another day in their life. But are they suffering at all? Fuck no. What? They're not going and hanging out on yachts. So the fuck what? I mean, I hear a lot of people, or should I say I read a lot of people, say online or whatever, oh, let me show you how to be balling. Let me show you. I have women all over me. I'm driving this car. I've got all this cash in my hand and blah, blah, blah. Look, baby. Okay, fine. You want love in your life? I don't know. If you think that having what are crazy amounts of money and that you have to impress women that way and all that, I mean, you've got more problems than you can imagine, and you're going to end up with the most superficial relationships. I mean, you're not going to have happiness there. You're just not. And that's the thing, is that I don't think we consider, like, what exactly is enough for you? You tell me what is enough. And not to get all like Fight Club about this or anything, but there's some truth to the statement, to the quote from Fight Club, where, the things you own end up owning you. Or how about here's another movie quote from a different movie. But the quote is that the more they own, the less they're worth. There's a lot of these things. A lot of these cases where, I don't get it. Like, what are you shooting for? Like, do you really need to be that billionaire? I don't want to be Bill Gates. No, I don't. I have no interest in that, because you know what happens when you become Bill Gates? We saw what happened when you become Bill Gates. You have the government breathing down your goddamn neck and making, a grown man cry like they did to Bill Gates. So I want you to consider, we have a beautiful, especially with cryptocurrencies, we have a beautiful opportunity to hold our wealth with as much obscurity. And yeah, it could have been done with cash too, to some degree, sure. But we have the beautiful opportunity to hold our wealth and our value in obscurity, and we can be obscure ourselves. And that's a direction that I think we should push. And I mean, yeah, you want your voice to be heard. You want your opinions to be heard. You want to create. You want to put it out there. You want other people to appreciate it. How many people's enough? Do you really need? I don't need. If I had 2 million listeners, am I going to complain? No, not really. I mean, not about the fact that I have 2 million listeners, but do I need 2 million listeners? Fuck no. Honestly, I just want to feel love. And you know what that means? That means that I could do the show for an audience of 1 and I would be happy, as long as it's the right one. We have these strange lifestyle obsessions. We have these strange obsessions with, I don't know, looking. Yeah, I don't get it. Look, I've jumped out of planes. I don't know. What makes that so fucking rebellious? Oh, wow, I jumped out of a plane. Holy shit. Man, look at me. I'm fucking rich. And what is that? What kind of life is that? What, so you can get a great picture for Instagram? Holy shit. You ever live for you? I think a lot of people, a lot of the things I talk about on Sovryn Tech, a lot of people are afraid of it for a few reasons, like getting off of, social media, deleting this account and that, having fewer accounts, using less services, not using like the latest and greatest smartphone or, to shine somebody on, because holy shit, yeah, you want to be with a person that's impressed by the fact that you have the fucking iPhone XXX. I don't know, whatever the latest one is. How pathetic. But I think a lot of people, they don't want to leave social media. They don't want to leave Facebook Messenger. They don't want to leave this or that, because I think that they're afraid if they do, they are going to miss out on some kind of opportunity in their life, be it love, maybe it's something to do with money, whatever. But the question I want to ask you on that are two. Okay. We got into the concept of power. We talked about how, actually having power comes with, a degree of responsibility, and that responsibility may not lead to happiness, which you think you get from having the power that you're talking about, whatever that power looks like. It could be a promotion. It could be more money, whatever. Okay. We talked about that. We talked about how, the concept of having enough and being happy, with that and recognizing what's really happy. And that's what I want to touch on here. You're worried you're going to miss out perhaps on some kind of business opportunity or something like that, or you're not going to have enough people, to look at whatever your creative endeavor is, you name it. Okay. Or you're worried that you're not going to find perhaps the love of your life. I understand these things, and putting yourself out there in some way, I would argue there's plenty of other ways to do it besides fucking social media and perhaps even the internet. Okay. Like you can, as I've said, many guys, as I've said, and gals and Z's, as I've said many times, you want to meet the love of your life, just do what you're doing. And, if you need to, just wait until someone shows up there that's doing the same thing as you are. Then you already have a foundation, and it's not based on the fake representation of yourself or others that ends up happening online, because that's everybody showing off their, woo, best life, whatever the fuck that is. But I find it very hard to believe that anyone really just wants money for the sake of money. Like, are you really obsessed with those pieces of paper? I mean, if you're into Bitcoin, yeah, you might be obsessed with the technology and promoting the technology. That might be a little bit of a different thing. But then there's no other money quite like Bitcoin, is there? That's kind of a unique situation where it's the transmitter, it's the network and the money at the same time, right? Yeah. So that's a little bit different, but I think you understand what I'm saying. I don't know many people that just want money for money's sake, or even all the things that you want. Okay. A lot of the great joys in life, fuck, do you really have to own a Porsche? Or could you just, there's services, what is it, Turo or whatever, there's services out there now where you can just rent one for a day and you can go out there and have a good time. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper and way more practical, and you don't have to worry about storing it or the insurance or anything like that if you just rent the damn thing. Or whatever it is that you want. Here's the thing. I think what you're looking for is connection from other human beings. That's what you really want. You want to be connected to other people. And I appreciate that, and so do I. Perhaps you want to find the love of your life. I totally understand that. Totally understand that. Okay? Then what you're really going after, and I'm not the first person to ever say this sort of thing, okay, but this drives the point home, and we'll probably run this right through to the end, okay? What you're really going after is, you don't want money, you don't want the yacht, you don't want all this fancy shit, you don't want this blah, blah, blah. You just want love in your life. Okay, well then go after love. Make love the goal, not being on social media trying to impress people with something clever that you said or some other kind of nonsense. Okay, don't do that. Don't like pretend. Cut out the middleman and just go and find that love in your life. And believe me, it is out there. That person is out there for you. Trust me. And you're going to feel that foundation and connection with this person far better than when you have to cut through all the crap or play the 20 questions game or whatever because you met this person on social media or I don't know, whatever the fuck you did, however you made it happen. I have no idea. Okay? Trust me, you really can make this work. And if you want to say you're online because you're engaging in activism or you're doing all this other stuff, blah, 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 you're not, trust me, you're not going to change things that way. You're just not. I've said this so many times, I'm going to say it again. Here's a nice refresher. Do you remember what you posted on social media, I don't know, 2 days ago? I bet you thought it was the most fucking important thing you've ever posted in your life. You just came up with the most brilliant thing. You have no idea what it is today. You don't know. And I guarantee you nobody else knows. It is, you could say what we do in life echoes in eternity. Yeah, what we do, not what we fucking post and put out there in digital horseshit. You've got to get out there. You've got to live. But live in obscurity, where that gives you the opportunities where you're off the radar. Okay, this is something else. We're talking earlier about episode 200. During episode 200, I told you about this. I said things are going to get to such a place. And there was that classic video. I keep saying classic. Now I consider it a classic. Okay, there was that very telling video from the Pentagon. It was a training video that Glenn Greenwald, his outfit, ended up putting out there. Okay, The Intercept, right? That they put out there where it talked about how within 10 years. And this is like 3 years ago or so. Within 10 years, there's going to be so many encrypted technologies and all these different technologies. You could tell they were kind of talking about cryptocurrencies as well. There's going to be all these technologies that basically people are going to be able to live outside of the system. That's really what they were saying. Okay, if you got to go find the show notes for episode 200, go ahead and do it, and you can watch the video and you can see my point. And that's the trick. But you're not losing something because nobody knows your name or because most people don't know you. Quite the opposite. You're actually gaining something. You're gaining the actual freedom you've been trying to get this whole time, supposedly with your activism, or maybe you'll actually get that love and be able to enjoy that love without being weighed down by being constantly available online to handle this email or to do this or whatever. You can get out of that whole system. It's ugly, folks. And you say, yeah, but if I'm not there for that email, I might not get to $1 billion. And then I want you to ask yourself why the fuck you want $1 billion. I'm not going to tell you, you want what you want. That's up to you. You want to, I say this all the time. I'm not going to judge. You want to spend your life with a bag of Doritos on a couch. And I'm serious. Watching whatever, you want to watch the latest Babylon 5 or something or Game of Thrones. Okay, I'm going to judge you if you're going to watch that horse shit. If you're going to watch Game of Thrones, screw that. All right. But that's what you want to do with your life. You're happy. There you go. The purpose of life. I say this over and over again. I'm going to say it again. The purpose in life is to be happy. But I would argue that the only way to be truly happy, where every moment, every choice is truly your own, is if you live in obscurity. If you want, like the French saying went, if you want to be happy, live hidden. If you want to live happy, live hidden. And I think we're very confused about that. And I don't know. I don't exactly understand. I mean, maybe there's things that people want to do where they feel like they have to be an activist for it and they have to somehow normalize it and push it out there. I think the best way to normalize shit is to just fucking live it unapologetically. Am I complaining saying, oh, how terrible that there's some people out there that have gotten some notoriety and, might be even seen as heroes or things like this? Well, to not get into the whole philosophy around the problems of having heroes, I'm glad that there's people out there that have done things that have brought to light a lot of the nastiness, a lot of the dirty deeds that authoritarian structures in this world today have been doing. I'm very, very glad for people that have done that work and put that out there. But I guarantee you a lot of those same people have a very different understanding of what happiness is and what they really want in life, and they have a different understanding of what's important. Not that I want everybody to go through this. Okay, I mean, again, you think I'm just like rambling, or that what does this have to do with tech or science or anything like that? I think it has everything to do with it. Because there's a reason that we want privacy, because privacy gives us ultimately our choices, because that way, whatever you want to call it, we'll just say the surveillance society isn't looking at you and going down your throat because they find something objectionable or because they want to tell you what they want you to do for them. You get to live for yourself. You need to know why that this is important. And that, in fact, the opposite direction of living, even to the point where you think that it's a good thing because it makes you famous, is actually harmful ultimately. Or even if there's some degree of happiness that comes with that, it's not as great as the happiness is when you live in obscurity. I want you walking away with that message. Live in obscurity. Let me assure you something, though. This concept of having enough, that is another key concept of living in obscurity. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the minimalists. Okay, I get called a minimalist all the time. All right, fine, whatever. Okay, I just don't like to be weighed down. It's not something where like I am, again, kind of that saying, the Fight Club saying, right? Where, the things you own end up owning you. I don't like to be owned. But a point I want to get to, and it's kind of a somber one. I don't necessarily want to end with this, but I think it's important to bring up. Those people, who have really like put it all on the line, for whatever they felt was right and true. and now they have to, perhaps like an Edward Snowden has to go and run off and live who knows where and how uncomfortably or whatever. Again, when you get into a situation where your life, either your actual life as in your ability to breathe, or whether or not you're going to end up in jail or, prison, something like that, when your life is on the line or livelihood is on the line, you get a very suddenly, instantly in your head, things come to your mind that you suddenly realize what's really important. Now, I don't want people to have to go through that sort of thing. I don't want any single one of you to have to go through wondering what is it like to actually be faced with potentially going to prison for your life, for forever, and they throw away the key. I don't want you to have a near-death experience. And I don't mean like seeing white lights. I mean almost dying. I've been there. Okay? I almost died. I was shot, was bleeding, like there was no tomorrow, and that is that's not metaphor. There could have been no tomorrow for me. Okay? This is back when I was in the military. I know that taste. I'm not boasting about it because I wish it never happened. But it gave me a fucking perspective on what the fuck matters. And it gave me the concept of enough. What is enough? And the importance of being happy. And that you go after that with all you've got. But you know what that happiness is. You have to answer that question because you can't. Life's too short. Hopefully we all get to live forever. Or live very extended lives thanks to technology and so much else. I'm on board. Okay? But life right now is too short for you to waste time on doing things that don't make you happy, to waste time on things that aren't that aren't of your choice, aren't of your choosing. Maybe if you want to feel like you got to eat shit for a couple of years to be able to get there, okay, fine. But do you really fucking need billions of dollars? Do you really need to be The Rock? Do you need to be Bill Gates? Do you need to be this person or that? No. So I want you to figure out what you truly want. And then I want you to realize, okay, you're going to ask yourself that question first, what you really want. Cue the Spice Girls if you really want to, okay? But then I want you to, when you know what you want, I want you to realize that the only way you can appreciate what you want is if you live in obscurity, is if you're not known, is if history doesn't remember you. Or if they do, maybe it's like the old Harlan Ellison saying, right? For a brief time I was here, and for a brief time I mattered. That's what I want you to grasp. Get this, electroplated dreams that you're seeing fucking on TV or on the internet or whatever. Stop trying to be insta-famous. Stop trying all this horseshit because you're not actually living your life if you're doing that stuff. You can't. It's the way the system is set up. It keeps you trapped. It keeps you, what's the Skid Row song, right? To be king of the world, you must slave to the grind. Fuck that. You don't need to be king of the world. Just be the king of someone's heart. And then she can be the queen of your heart, or you can both be kings. I don't care. Whatever. Live in obscurity. Appreciate the fact. Understand that without privacy, without anonymity, without all this stuff, and the technologies that can provide all of that today, there too, that you will never really be happy because you are constantly going to be under the eye, under the criticism, and so much more. You will be under the forces of other people. And fuck that. Fuck that. Live your own goddamn life. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Sovryn Tech. Sorry it came out a little bit late. Woo! But, it happens. But you're going to get another one real soon. So we'll wrap this baby up. And, of course, if you want to get all kinds of, I tell you, thousands of hours of content, there's so many of you that are in the Zomia ONE Underground. You can join up to get access to, you get to do the Wednesday Q&A where you can ask questions. And, we get to interact with each other, which, again, it's all about connection, right? But we can do it, well, actually, it's kind of hidden. It's sort of behind a paywall, right? It's kind of nice. No, anyway, that's it for this episode. Remember what's enough. Live in obscurity. I will see all of you on the next Sovryn Tech. I'll see you on the other side.